died by suicide on Sunday. Her mother, April Simpkins, said in a statement that Chris was dealing with high-functioning depression, which she hid from everyone, including me, her closest confidant, until very shortly before her death. Simpkins added, "We miss her laugh, her words of wisdom, her sense of humor, and mostly her hugs." She asked that instead of flowers, people make donations to Dress for Success. That was an organization that Chesley Chris cared about. If you or someone you know needs resources, you can call the National Alliance on Mental Illness helpline. The number is 1-800-950-6264.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. In lieu of the introduction that we normally give, we're going to get right into this most important topic. As we transition here, I'd like to bring on Ms. Tamika Hatcher, who is a civil rights educator, Mrs. Kepsia Hawkins, who is a public education professional, Ms. Mainika Ojo, who is a professional in diversity, equity, and inclusion, Mrs. Janine Peterson, who is a public health professional, and Dr. Amber Sessoms, who is in the mental health profession. So welcome again, ladies. Of course, you're no stranger to the show. Thank you for always answering the call when we call to get your words of advice and wisdom and just overall experience to help us present a format to the various communities that we engage with from your perspectives, and particularly Black women. So as you could see, we're starting off with, of course, the untimely and unfortunate issue of suicide, and most importantly, overall Black women's health. And so with that, I'll just ask if we would start with Ms. Hatcher, go to Mrs. Hawkins, and then down to Ms. Ojo, Mrs. Peterson, and then Dr. Sessoms. If you can just give an opening. Were you all able to see our intro?
Yes.
And we all know why we're here, of course, dealing with the former Miss America and talking about overall mental health, in particular with our Black women. So if you could just give a brief, maybe 2-minute intro in terms of your perspective as we embark upon this conversation this evening.
Okay.
Ms. Hatcher.
Thank you. Good evening, Karl, and good evening to all of the esteemed panelists. We've all had conversations with one another before, so I feel like this is like a living room chat that we're having. And the topic of high-functioning depression and suicide in the African-American community is a problem that is growing. And while suicide rates overall are trending downward throughout the nation, they are going up for Black men and women. And I think some of this is due to the ongoing myth of the quote-unquote strong Black woman, or the myth that Black people do not take their lives, or because of the fact that we just don't have the luxury or liberty to fall down and wallow in depression. We've got too much going on. We're taking care of children. We're taking care of elders. We're trying to work and stay on our jobs. We're living in a COVID global pandemic, and also we're dealing with the global pandemic of racism. So all of these factors are, like every other health factor, are disproportionately beginning to affect African Americans, and it's having an impact and taking a toll on Black women in particular. So I'm very excited about this conversation and looking forward to a robust discussion tonight.
Thank you very much. Hawkins, please.
Good evening, everybody. I am not a mental health professional. I'm an educator. So I am here to just speak on behalf of my personal experiences and what I have experienced through my interactions with others, whether it be parents, students, that type of thing. I feel as though for Black people and Black women in general, we are tired. That is the best way that I can sum it up. We are tired on so many levels. And this conversation has so many layers to it, just from personal experience with mental health. I was diagnosed as depressed when I was a teenager. I've dealt with depression my whole life. So there are so many stigmas we have to break through. We have to understand that first and foremost, depression doesn't look like anything. It looks like all of us. It looks like everything. So we have to get past that statement of, oh, someone doesn't look depressed, because then comes the pressure of that not looking depressed. There's so many layers to this. There's so many layers of what is perceived as weakness. The taboo, I think, still in the male community, Black male community, with seeking therapy, talking. That is still something that is so difficult for so many Black men to do, because again, so many layers as to why they've not been taught or exposed to that emotional side of manhood, which is a side that exists and has to be there and is perfectly fine to embrace. But again, so many layers, whether it be socioeconomic factors, which then impact the family, which then yada, yada, yada. I could go on and on. We all know this. But again, we are tired, and we have got to find a way to just stop and breathe, stop and get back to nature, stop and frolic. It may sound silly, but something as simple as frolicking in the grass, going out in nature every day, spending that time, it does something to you. It does something for you. It helps. I can, again, I can only speak for myself, but that is something that we have to get back to. Laughter, 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 laughter. And that's not to trivialize all the other work that must be done. But if there's something you could do today, right now, that is free, laugh. And that does so much for your mental health in that moment. So that's my little spiel. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. Ms. Manika.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for bringing this subject up. Just within the past few weeks, we have seen so many public deaths by suicide. And it's really heartbreaking that these people were not able to seek out the help that they needed to move on. Interesting enough, even though this is February and it's quote unquote Black History Month, we always celebrate it, but technically it is Black History Month, and the theme this year is Black Health and Awareness. And so mental health is one of those things that we really do need to focus on. And since we are talking about African American women, we really need to look at what's happening in our community, why we don't have the balance that we need to find and seek the joy that we need. So really moving away from that stigma of being the strong Black woman holding everyone up, it's really not helping us at all as we move through our lives, particularly during these times where we've seen racial discrimination really at an all-time high. It seems to be impacting us more and more. And then, of course, being African American women, we have the intersection of being female and a person of color. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion and really delving into what we consider as a layman to be high-functioning depression, and really how we, as this group here on the couch, as Tamika states, can really talk about how we can seek out that joy, because that 1 minute of sorrow really needs to have 5 minutes of joy to overcome it.
Perfectly said. Mrs. Peterson. You're on mute, Mrs. Peterson.
Good evening. Thank you for presenting this topic that is extremely important, particularly around this time. When you just heard about how tired we are, there's so many challenges that we're all facing as women, as just people in general, but we don't talk about it enough. We always cloud it over, trying to be strong for our families, put that face forward. And then we don't know where to go. Finding service, finding support is not always easy. Our systems aren't made to actually allow us entree into what's available with those resources. It seems as though the system makes it so difficult for all of us to know where to go, how to access, where are services that are affordable. And so this type of conversation, I think, is extremely important to be able to identify possible solutions. This is not something that's going to happen overnight. We have so many challenges in front of us. Our children are suffering with depression and isolation. because of COVID. The workforce is suffering because of all the pressures on them. And so this is a long-term kind of solution that we have to look forward to. And this is just the beginning of these kinds of dialogues to help us to navigate the waters through, to know that there is support base for all of us to address this kind of problem.
Exactly. Dr. Sessoms.
Good evening. So much of what my colleague said just resonates with me from the Black woman cape, right? So I think that's a really important part of the conversation where we have to start unlearning these narratives that we have been socialized to say that we are strong, we can do it all. And then to Mrs. Peterson's point about where are the resources, right? Because I was having a conversation recently with a friend about this very thing about taking off our capes. We don't have to be strong. And she says, so what happens when we take them off, right? Like who's there to support us? Who's there to do the work? So there's a lot of that I want to talk about in terms of instilling hope in people and also like demystifying, destigmatizing suicide and suicidal ideation, what depression looks like from my colleague, Ms. Hawkins. I am also neurodivergent, right? I often say I came out the womb with depression, right? But you learn how to maneuver. Sometimes you put on a smile when you're crying inside, but how do you start naming the issue? So for me, it's about naming it. It's about understanding what your warning signs are about what's going on in the country and understanding that it's okay to ask someone if they're thinking about taking their life, if they're having suicidal thoughts. I find in the work that I do, when I can name that for people and recognize it, it's liberating for them. It takes the stigma off. It takes away the shame. And it's like, you can almost feel the weight lifting off their shoulder. Yes, I need help. Instilling hope in people, and also understanding that contagion is real, right? We have all these recent suicides. So when this happens, when there's people that are on the national platform, those that are on the fringes that are at risk, that have maybe contemplated this, that have a history, or more likely to make an attempt. So we have to be mindful of that as well.
So where do we go from here becomes the question. I guess, as we continue, to have this conversation, the control room will continue to have resource hotlines, phone numbers, etc. Many of you have added to the chat, so we'll run those across the screen. But let's delve right into it. Please help me unpack this term, high functioning depression. Help me unpack that for the sake of our listeners and for my own edification as well. So not only as Black women, but as professionals who not only is the home leaning on you, but also the profession is leaning on you. Not only the home and the profession, but then the common community is also leaning on you because we notice you. You stand out. You're in certain positions. Help me unpack high functioning depression.
So I'll jump in, and I want to also give the disclaimer too that Ms. Hawkins gave. I am not a mental health professional either. However, I am an educator, and I have been, well studied in psychology and some psychiatry. And so I think we can level set and start from a baseline. Want to first define what depression is. And so the American Psychiatric Association defines depression or major depressive disorder as depressive symptoms that can vary from mild to severe and can include feeling sad or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in activities once enjoyed, changes in appetite, weight loss or gain unrelated to dieting, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy or increased fatigue, increase in purposeless physical activity, things like inability to sit still, pacing, hand wringing, kind of like walking the floor, slow movements or speech. And they say these actions must be severe enough to be observable by others, feeling worthless or guilty, difficulty thinking, concentrating, or making decisions, and thoughts of death or suicide. And so very similar to what many of the other ladies have already expressed, I too am someone who has dealt with bouts of what we call high functioning depression. And when we say high functioning, what that means is that you're still getting up, going to work every day. You're still showing up for your family. You're still going to the proverbial party, as I call it. But oftentimes you see that commercial where they have the mask and the people like they put the mask up to their face and like they're hiding it. And that's really what high functioning depression is. Oftentimes that people that are closest to you don't even know that you're suffering and you're going through it. And it's often associated with real feelings of guilt and shame because we think I should be able to handle this better. I should be able to function better. But when you really are depressed, thoughts are getting jumbled in your head. Just your general ability to function is not normal. There's a lot going on in your head. And so that's really what it is. And what it looks like is many of us. And it's good that we are unpacking this today and taking away the stigma from it, because many of us have been embarrassed to admit that, hey, I struggle with this. And while we may not be on the proverbial side of the bridge, we might be going through crying bouts. We might be popping off on our family. We might be going off on the job inappropriately because that stress and that depression manifests and it comes out in other ways.
Feel free. Anyone.
Yeah, and I'll just add, just the part about what's going on in our heads and this mental fog that can happen, right? That there's no clarity of thought oftentimes. So when you're feeling this way, getting out of that funk, I often would say to children in particular, sometimes you feel like when you have this depression or when you're dealing with mental illness, that it's just how it has to be. I'm always going to feel like this and nothing's ever going to make it change. And I often tell people, you don't have to feel like this every day, right? And there's a level of like tearfulness that comes from that and thinking like, I thought I always had to feel this way, because those thoughts will compound and they don't allow you, they give you the despair. They give you the, I have to be there for everyone else and there's nothing left for anyone else. But I find some of the hope is what I find when people can start helping other people. That's one of the ways that you can cope and you can deal is when you find purpose, right? I often find that people are living what they feel like is a purposeless life. Like, why am I even here? So I'm 40, about to be 41. So you enter, I think that's midlife crisis time. I don't know anymore, but you enter this stage of your life where you feel like, why am I even here? What's my purpose in life? And I'm finding that even little ones, right? 6, 7-year-olds, you're like, what's my purpose in life? What am I even here for? So this compounding feeling of trying to find your purpose, trying to find your path also is really hard for people, feeling like, why am I even here? What's this world? What am I contributing to? And also the other compounding part is this twin pandemic that you've talked about of, we have this the most recent racial reckoning and COVID, and people are really starting to reconcile and sit with what is going on in this country, right? The real despair that they're feeling, especially being a person of color, the despair is so grappling and debilitating that purpose and not having that purpose also compounds it. But finding hope and purpose and how do we help people to do that, I think is one of the biggest gifts that we can try to impart to people as well.
Let me stop there for a second, because as not only a Black woman, but a Black woman professional who's given information in terms of helping while admitting that you all, I'm talking about you, especially Dr. Sessoms, with our history in terms of where you were previously and everything, in terms of schools. Notice what you just did. You still talked about helping other people.
Right, right.
So
that's so much a part of my identity, right?
Yeah, right.
When thinking about leaving, right? And so much of it is tied to that. I'm going to find this quote. So there was recently, I said this backstage, but there was recently an article that came out about Black women. It is okay to let go of your cape.
Yes.
And one of the things that gut punched me was the writer said, we have always been America's nursemaids. And we are often fighting for people who will never fight for us. Right? Like, I'm like, that is who we are innately. Like, we are helpers and to the detriment of ourselves, and even recognizing that you don't even care about me and I'm still willing and I'm still going to come to you and still try to help you and invite you to see my humanity. So yes, like it's very much tied to who I am. I'm glad you called me in on that, right? But that is very much tied to who I am for all of us. Like, we are helpers. And if I can't help, then who am I? If I cannot be a support to others, then who am I? So again, it goes back to your purpose or how you identify.
Yeah. I just thought that not funny or anything about it, but just nature, just the natural. And I guess one of the things that stands out to me is there's this image, and it always comes up on my feed. I posted it years ago, but it is the Black woman nursing a white child from her breast, with the American flag draped, in the symbolism, the whole piece about, there's times where historically our Black women were not allowed to take care of the very humans they birthed. However, they were in the master's house nursing this child, and so that just, so it just threw me there. So I digress. Mrs. Peterson or Monica?
Yeah. I just want to comment because service is my love language also, but not to the benefit of our own mental health. It's so important that we look at ways in which we can exercise balance when we are helping or assisting people to move forward, and also to recognize when we need help ourselves. As Karl knows, many of you all know, I've had some significant losses in the last couple of months, and I just had to pull back to say, look, I need help. And so I have a therapist on speed dial, literally right now, to help me get through these moments that I am feeling of depression, situational depression, and then compounded with other things that are happening in the life. And just, sometimes life just takes you for a full swoop. And how do you cope? And so sometimes we have to look back and step back and say, look, what's going on with us? And we need to step back. We can't help anyone else. We need to help ourselves. And so I'm at that point right now, and this is what we need to recognize also. I look at that beautiful young lady, Chesley, and what she may have been thinking through the times that she was suffering through the high function depression. I'm wondering if there could have been someone just to ask her, how are you doing? And not just assume that her life was just all roses and daisies because she had all these significant accomplishments. The high functionality of that really points to it actually being a problem that she felt that she had to continue to get all these accomplishments. And then there was no one to help her to really follow through with her life to really see how she was doing. Everyone just assumed she was okay. And so that was a significant toll on her. And it's really very unfortunate that we had to see her lose her life at 30 because she had so much to live for, and she never would have known that. She will never know that.
Let me just be clear. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, and I was just going to add to that. So to Monica's point, and as we're talking about Chesley Chris and really what she was feeling, a lot of it, what she even said in interviews before was that she felt a sense of or feeling like she was running out of time because she was 30 years old. And for women, we all have this sense of a biological clock that's different from men. Men can reproduce well into your, 80s or something. And, by 30, all of the biological indicators and the social indicators are on women. Well, are you going to get married? Are you going to have a baby? And she spoke about feeling like she was running out of time and like it was going so fast and she didn't know if she was going to meet all of her marks. Also, too, she was dealing with racism and people teasing her, bullying her online. I mean, of all things about her hair, beautiful hair. And that's another reason why I intentionally wore my afro today. Like I wore my natural hair like this because hair is such a big thing for Black women. It's something that we spend so much time on and have so much angst around. And do we look good to ourselves, to other women, to men? Will someone like us? Will they be attracted to us? And she was dealing with that. And a kid told me one time that they described depression as a feeling of sadness all over their body, that they felt all the time, that they just could not shake. Sadness all over their body. And now for young people in particular, you've got the aspect of social media, stunting for the gram, doing it for the gram. So even though she had all these things going on, the constant feeling that she had to be on at all times. And we all know, we're all, well in age and, middle age at least. And you see grown adults like out here, pulling a facade and charade, as I like to call it, for Instagram or for Facebook to make people feel like they're doing better than what they actually are, when in truth, they're really lonely. they're really hurting, they're sad, they're depressed, and they just don't want to admit it to themselves, let alone to anyone else.
Ms. Peterson, are you?
To the point of everyone wanting to live up to someone's expectations. And, the tragic suicide that just happened with all that pressure. I mean, when, Tamika talked about, being 30 and, the clock ticking, where does that come from? It comes from someone putting pressure on someone else to say, your clock is ticking and you need to be married, whether or not you found the right person to be married or not. We put so many pressures on ourselves to live up to someone else's expectation. And at some point, we have to say, what do we want? Happiness has to start from within. We're always trying to make someone else happy, our children happy, but our children see us. And, if we're not reflecting a healthy attitude and a healthy behaviors, what does that say to them? And how does this just continues from generation to generation? Whether we're talking about young people or older people, I was around in the civil rights era, and the feeling right now is almost getting back to almost hopelessness. Are we ever going to get out of this? We thought we had really come far from civil rights. We made so many strides, but you turn on the TV today and you see the civil rights, all of the voting, rights being taken away from us, the brutality that's out there. It is so reminiscent of, the civil rights movement where we were brutalized, and it's happening today. And so, as we look at the generations of people out here, transcending over to older people, it's a matter of what is life about? What's left? What's going to happen, to our generations coming up? And so, whether we're talking about that young person and, we know what's happening with children and COVID and being isolated at home, and they've stopped learning so much in school these days, all the way through to, our professionals in the workforce, all the way to the seniors. There are so many challenges that we're facing. I love the statement that Dr. Sesson said about take the cape off. We are vulnerable to everything that's happening around us. And we've got to realize that if we don't take care of ourselves, everything around us, our families, everything is not going to be okay. We've got to really stop and find the support that we need for ourselves.
Absolutely. There's I'm having church over here and making all these connections.
Mm-hmm.
But it's some of the things like that I want to name is that when you were talking earlier, like all the colleagues were talking about imposter syndrome, right? Like I think that is coming so quickly to mind, especially with us being Black women and just women in general. There's so much research on us feeling like we're frauds, we're going to be found out. And it's usually like people that have this perfectionist, this quality, these high achievers, which she was, right? So I put myself in that camp, right? Because we are taught as Black women, you got to work 10 times as hard just to be seen. You know what? You're not going to get anything easy. And you're thinking, even looking at the Supreme Court, like all that's coming out about that. And they're saying like, there's
no out of my notes. Get off my notes.
They're going to have like these people, these women are going, their credentials are going to be ridiculous. And even with that, right? Like we know we're not even going to be able to even be seen unless we do the most, right? So living that way and thinking like, I have to be professional, I have to do this. So for people saying like, I'm going to wear my hair like this, all of those things feed into you. And then for your listener to say about being your authentic self, like what is that? Like unpacking what that even means in a world that tells us that how we show up in our Black bodies as women is not right, right? We have to be like leaning towards whiteness or whatever that means. So all of those things, like you're naming like racial trauma that we see on the media all the time, and how I have to turn that off. I cannot, right? I cannot subject myself to that because that will take me down a dark path. But that racial trauma is ever present. And that's what our kids are seeing. That's what we're seeing on a daily basis. And that is what we're looking at. Like, that equates to PTSD in some cases, where that's what it looks like. So all of those things are causing us great harm. And then but I think that was it. And then the professionalism also topped on that. So I was writing down notes as you were talking, but you're making these connections for me that I just wanted to just name. So thank you for the conversation.
Definitely. Mrs. Hawkins.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in there, everyone keeps mentioning, take the cape off, take the cape off. I agree 100, 1,000, 1,000,000%. My mom actually called me last week and told me she was checking in on me because I'm recovering from COVID. You know, I have some good days, some not so good days. So she was just calling to check. And I was telling her about something new I wanted to do. And she was like, wait a minute, Kepi, slow down. You're not well. You already do this, you do this, you do this, you do that, you do that. And now you want to do this. And I'm like, yeah, because, and I'm giving her the reasons why. And she said, no, slow down, take something off your plate. But no, this needs to be done. If I don't do this, there's no one doing it right now. The kids need this, blah, blah, blah. I'm giving her all the reasons in the world. And she's harping on me, slow down, slow down. And it got to the point, we were joking, but I said, you know what? I can't. I don't know how. You didn't show me how. I didn't see you slow down ever, not once. So how am I supposed to know how to slow down? Wow. And she said, and we started laughing, and she said, you're right. I said, yeah, so I get the concept. Conceptually, I get it. Intelligent me gets it. Emotional me, how in the world do you even begin to do that? No one before us has done that. My grandmother didn't slow down. Her mom didn't slow down. No one has slowed down. And now we're like at this boiling point as Black women, where it's about to explode. It's going to happen. And we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I'm 40. I turned 40 October of last year. So with my generation, we know we need to, but how? How do you even begin to do that? There's so much work that needs to be done that no one else is doing. So how do I slow down and sit there and just watch that gap? How do I fix that in my soul? I know that's something that I struggle with as a Black woman. I can't reconcile it in my soul. It doesn't feel right to sit there and not see anything done about certain things. So you could tell me slow down all day long. And again, conceptually, I get it. I know why I should, but I can't. So I think that's a whole other level.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should say, I feel like I can't, but to me, it's I can't. It's not, no, I feel like I can't. I simply cannot, because that work must be done. So I don't know if it means gathering with like-minded people so that you carry less of the load.
Yes.
I don't know how to, where that begins, but I know that's a huge issue for me. How do you slow down? How do you take that cape off? You have to, you want to take it and burn it some days, but how do you do that? And I think that's where a lot of us get stuck. We read the sayings and everything and quotes on social media, and it sounds good and we're motivated. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to breathe. No, you're not. You're going to stop long enough to keep scrolling through this feed. And then once you're done, you're probably back to whatever it is that you're doing that you need to put down. So how do you do it?
Can I jump in on that one? And I have a confession to make. All of y'all were not chosen by mistake. We all have individual conversations. We all, share professional spaces. And the bottom line was, I thought, what better way to bring people together with common causes than those who can help each other. So part of the first step, to your point, is being your sister's keeper right now with those that are here, for starters. Having offline conversations, having this continuous ongoing conversation, not in terms of how you can help, but how you can receive help and be capable and willing to let your guards down with one another. Mm-hmm. All of you on there has helped me as a Black man in positions, whether it was as an educator with my child, or sharing a birthday or church service, or when I don't know how Ms. Peterson keeps her position, because when I was way off in left field doing what I was doing, she never gave up on me, always still invited me to meetings. talking about remaining strong with, the minority community and never giving up. And so she was protecting me in a way, and all of you have protected me in a way as we've been on this journey of making sure our community was at the forefront and not an afterthought of accessing viable resources. And so I wanted to bring you all together for each other, not only for our community, but for each other, so that you can have a foundation to lean on and begin to trust and begin to network with, not for business, but for self, because it is not selfish to be selfless. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And, this is an intentional conversation. It was intentional in terms of me inviting you all. I love the fact that my mother is actually watching, because she has to learn a lot from this. She's saying very informative, but hopefully it is edifying for her, because she does not slow down. And she keeps going. My daughters, the same with them. And so they've seen their grandmother, they've seen, and so to the earlier point, it is perpetuated. Mrs. Hawkins said it, plainly. Yes, we can slow down, but I don't know how to. It hasn't been learned. I can't identify. What does it look like? And then when you do slow down, who do you trust to fill that gap? And that's why I'm saying, if nothing else, it may not be for a male to fill, but you all know you got me, and others like me on your team, but you all have each other, and there are some more of you out there that we just need to make sure we have these created spaces that are real, that are not abstract, but that are really concrete for you to level set, was a term that was used earlier, for yourself, for you to be okay not being okay, in order to make sure others are okay. And oftentimes those others look like me in this community that is not always returning the favor to those that look like you. So I say that to say, we want to take a quick commercial break. Give us all a chance to level set all over again, and then we'll come back on the other side of this commercial with a seat at the table with our esteemed panel of guests addressing the most sensitive subject of Black women's mental health. We'll see you on the other side of this commercial break. All right, and welcome back. So as we can see, this is the photo we're talking about. Our Black women taking the cape off. Thoughts, ladies?
Ooh.
That's such a powerful image to see there. And, we just have to be really intentional as Black women to realize that we cannot hold the weight of the world on us, and that we do have a right to look and seek out our own joy, and to be a part of a society that values us just for who we are, and that's just simply being a human being and not being a superwoman.
Others, feel free. Well,
it just reminds me of that quote when you talk about like Black girl magic, and how I use that so often, right? It's a coined phrase, but when we talk about magic, how harmful that can be, because then it's like we're not real. Like we don't bleed. Like we have to, like you're saying, carry the weight of the shoulder. But that is, I'm still grappling, actually, Karl, with what you said earlier about holding space and community. So that's still sitting with me, even with that short break. I'm still there, because that's just it. So when a colleague was sharing about how do I do it? I've never been taught that. And the how do we share space? How do we hold space for each other? There's a healing that comes from that. So I just honor her for even sharing that and having the ability to name that for her mother. That's the liberation, right? That when we come in these spaces, whether it's here or when we just get in these spaces with like-minded, or not even like-minded, but people that have a shared identity, there's so much research on that. Like Dr. William Cross, who really was the forefront of doing racial identity development, talks a lot about that with Black identity development. Like, but it's not so much that we get to this place of autonomy that we internalize our race, right? But it's about when we're in shared spaces with people that have a shared identity, that we will grapple with that we will contest, that we will fight for a solution. That is the joy. Even in that pain, there's joy in that. So when you were saying that, that's where I was going, because Ms. Hawkins, you were naming that, and you were building that community with your mother and liberating her by naming that. And that she had a moment, right, of reflection, and she's like, you're right. That is what I see. And that's the beauty, I think, of, 40s. And I don't know, like, I'll just speak for my generation. I know that that's something that I had to help with instill in my family, that we have to name the trauma, that we have to talk about it, that we can't hold it, because when you internalize it, right, what happens? It manifests in depression, anxiety, addiction, all of these things. But you naming that is liberation for her to say, like, there's power in that, and there's courage in that. So I just honor you for that, and for you sharing that today, because you're modeling for others, right? You're liberating others by you liberating yourself. So just that, to me, just is everything. So just thank you for that.
So I'll add to that. This image, like, for me right now, well, it's so deep and it's so layered. Like, I can't even deal with America right now. Like that. Like, I can't even go there. It's so loaded. Like, she's feeding this baby to the detriment of her own baby. She's there with that child 24/7 while her own child is not even being nursed. And it just speaks to so many sacrifices that we have. I want to talk about Black women's anger, because that subject, the last time we were all on, many of us were on together, and I think we scratched the surface of that a little bit. We talked about it, but it's something that's so rarely even acknowledged, that Black women have anger or have room for anger. And like, so my career path is government and in politics. I'm a political science major by profession. And so when we're looking at elections and that kind of thing, we talk about white anger. We talk about the Walmart moms, and we talk about them as a group and a voting bloc and getting together. But nobody never even acknowledges the power of the Black woman as a voting bloc, the fact that we have anger. I saw Sabrina Fulton. She was on, I think, Good Morning America the other day. We were talking about Trayvon Martin. He would have been 27 years old. And I was like still half asleep, and I was listening to her. And I heard in her voice now, it's been like 10 years since Trayvon passed, still so much anger, and understandably and justifiably so. She has not gotten over it. And people think because she's still functioning, she's advocating, she's doing all these other things, like, oh, well, look at the mothers of the movement, and they're over it. She's not over it. And I'll just give a confession, like myself. I've been up, so I deal with insomnia. I always have. But like situationally now. So I've shared before that I recently was sabotaged out of my job. So I'm unemployed right now, and it keeps me up at night. I have a little son to look after. I adopted, or I'm in the process of adopting a child right now. And so not only do I worry about myself, but I worry about how am I going to support my son? How am I going to feed him? How am I going to keep him on track? And it keeps me up. I haven't slept, and I'm not a crier. I don't be crying. I don't.
This is okay. This is part of it.
No,
the
I don't.
Okay part.
But like, so we talk about safe spaces, and every last one of these women on here, we've talked before. We've shared. One thing I can say about Black women is that we show up for each other. We show up for ourselves. And as I've been going through my experience, if nobody has showed up for me, Black women have showed up for me. My sisters have showed up for me. When I needed somebody to, anything, looking out with job applications, assistance, anything that you could possibly think of. Something as simple as, everybody looks out for the kids. Well, what about you, Mom? One of my sorors, like one of my best friends, Sharia, like it was around Christmas time, and she said, everybody's doing for Xavier, your son. I want to do something for you. Let's go get pedicures. And that's what we did. And it was such a thoughtful gesture, and something that I really, really appreciated. And it was just an act of self-care. So something that we have to do for ourselves is we have to make sure that we're eating. We have to make sure that we're getting enough sleep. We have to make sure that we're hydrating, that we're drinking enough water. And as I'm sitting here, because I haven't slept, I needed to have something to keep me going. But something that one of my coworkers put me on to is this yogi tea, stress relief, honey lavender, Soothing Serenity Blend, it's called. I really like it. And then also Sweet Chamomile Stress Support. And it helps to support for overall health. And also I take the Goli gummies, and this is the ashwagandha, and it helps for relax, restore, and unwind. So there are things that we can do to kind of help ourselves along. But situational depression, and we compartmentalize. One of the things that I talk about is like walls, like put up my walls, like that's it. And so you see me drop a couple, Jay-Z said I couldn't see him falling down my eyes. So I got to make the song cry. Like one of my therapies, in addition to going to therapy, for me, music is very helpful. So I listen to music. I listen to affirmations, the songs that help to keep me up. But we do a lot of trying to compartmentalize our pain, and we just leave it there without ever really dealing with it. And before I go, I have to say that as the Black woman fares, so the Black man fares. And so our mental health is intricately tied to their mental health. And a couple of days ago, I saw on Facebook, there was a meme about Black men and crying, and something about them, not having the space or the room to ever break down or show any emotion. And so this meme says, when Tyrese had a mental breakdown online in regards to not seeing his daughter for 2 years, people laughed at him and he became a meme. When Kanye West had a breakdown on TV, people called him crazy and he too became a meme. The world watched Will Smith listen to his wife tell him live that she had an affair. People laughed at Will. He too became a meme. Yet folks wonder why men don't open up about their mental health. And so between Black women and women, sometimes it's difficult for us to share. Sometimes it's difficult for us to hear one another when we're really going through it. And what we do, like I know that Black men, their thing is, I want to try to help. If I don't have a solution for you today, if I can't immediately fix it, well, then I just don't want to talk about it. And for us, we're feelers, we're thinkers, we're talkers, and it helps us sometimes to just even talk it out. So just even being able to listen. But what happens when we are shutting one another out, when we're laughing at them and making jokes and memes and not really giving them the space to ever deal with their feelings and their emotions and traumas too, because they feel that as well.
What's that old song, I Stand Accused? So as a Black man, I will say a lot of times, to your point earlier, Ms. Hatcher, is that if I can't come up with a solution right now, I don't think I could be helpful. And so I back off. I leave it go until I don't talk and I don't come out with possibilities. As Black men, we were taught to fix it, or or you're useless, basically, especially when it's helping the Black woman. So that's just the Black male perspective right now, since I'm the only one on the mic right now. But we will follow back up with that. Others, let's, as I did promise you all 1 hour, and I'm sure all of you are not rushing. But I want to be sensitive to everybody's time with respects to your schedules. Let's talk about, as we wind down, what we can do to truly destigmatize not being okay for you as Black women. What can the community do? What can your workplace do? What could your home consist of in terms of valuing you, respecting you? Not to say they don't, but what is it? Let's hear from you. What can we do? We all have notes, notepads and pencils. We're listening to you. Tell us how we can destigmatize you as Black women not being okay and that being okay.
Well, I think that our jobs, oftentimes, our employment, our place of business is oftentimes the primary stressor for us. And even in the employment where I've been told on the job, yeah, well, you got that strong Black woman thing going on. Like somebody said that to me. And now, I don't see that as a problem. I'm thinking in my head, like, and the problem with that would be what? But when something is being thrown at you as shade or a diss. So I'm sitting in the meeting and I'm hearing this and it's like, okay, that wasn't a compliment. And so I think just acknowledging the fact that Black women have feelings too, treating us equally to our white female counterparts, and also allowing us the luxury and the liberty of being delicate and feminine and showing some chivalry towards, or even just acknowledging our humanity. You ain't even got to go all super soft for us because we don't need that. But just recognize that we have feelings too.
equally or equitably?
Come on now, you know.
I'm being serious.
Equitably, not equally, because
Right.
we all are not starting from the same
There you
place
go.
in the same playing field.
I'm just trying to
of
be
course,
intentional.
absolutely.
A couple of things, Tamika and others said about just being your whole self. So I often bring up our now ancestor, Bell Hooks, who really helped me like in the work that I did, like thinking about your positionality and thinking about this radical self-love, this radical love that we have to have. So when you're talking about like bringing your full selves, like we have learned, right? We've been socialized to think like, I gotta leave home at home. I can't bring that into work, but we spend so much of our time there. So I'm thinking about how do we cultivate these liberatory spaces, these inclusive spaces. I think to your point, like that is very true. Like the racial trauma that we're experiencing, these microaggressions, all of these things can look like depression, can look like anxiety, can look like these things, not necessarily full, like looking at major depression, like actual diagnosis, but they can look like those things. But how do we mitigate that is through actually having these spaces where you're really looking at creating just workspaces, right? Not doing the little things like having like, okay, the potlucks, the cultural potlucks, or the things for Black History Month, like the diversity celebrations. Diversity just is, right? But we're trying to create and cultivate workspaces and environments that I can be my full authentic self, that I don't have to worry about you touching my hair. I don't have to worry about you being surprised that I'm Dr. Amber Sessoms. Those kind of things can lessen the trauma that we're facing on a daily basis that lead to things that can look like depression and PTSD and all of those things. That will help. I think for communities, right? So part of what I was naming earlier is that the naming of it within our families. So there's different variables that interact when you're thinking about suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, but that biological variable. So a lot of people don't go to the doctors, right? Especially within our community for these reasons, because they don't want to talk about it. We pray it away. We think that that's okay. I know God is a healer. He can do all things, but he also gave us medical doctors to help us in these situations. So think about biological factors that we might have a predisposition to mental illness because of family members. So looking at, even if they haven't had an official diagnosis, I know, right, that there's people within my family that are unmedicated, that are undiagnosed. So biological factors are going to be key. And then thinking about right now in this pandemic, that is huge. So that's why we have this surge within our community, because we're dealing with the intersections and the compounding variables of COVID, racial reckoning. So thinking about that, and also thinking about what has happened in your life, like sitting down and naming the trauma that happens within our families can help us to move to healing. So I think naming it, I always say that's the liberation, that's the power in it. And we don't spend enough time doing that. I did that with my family. We sat down and we just talked about it, and we cried about things what might be as simple as hair and skin color, right? And we talked about how our grandmother made us feel, or our mother made us feel, that we were pitting against each other. And that is where that healing started. So now we can come together and understand that we don't have to judge each other. We don't have to believe those narratives and stereotypes, and we can just be who we are. So I think that is huge for me.
Mrs. Peterson, thoughts? I think you're on mute still.
When we talk about the safe spaces, it also means trust. And that's really difficult for us to trust. I was in a conversation the other day about, just businesses and entrepreneurs, and how people come to this country, foreigners come to this country, and they are able to buy businesses and thrive in the businesses, but they group together, they work together. And when we talk about, how do we unpack this? How do we share the load? We have to build trust. We have to find people who are like-minded, who we can share with, and make that a safe place to be, because it's not about, living up to someone else's expectations or what they want to do, but it's sharing that burden and being able to toss ideas around and talk about the burdens of children or family or whatever, and not feel guilty. I think, that's a great start when, Karl, when you said, it was intentional who you brought together. Conversations like this have to start not just on the air, but it has to start in groups like this off the air where we can begin to build those networks. And, it's not easy for most of us to do all that sharing. We've been hurt in many ways when you share too much, or, people are always, trying to be negative around. But there are those of us, just like on this panel, who are positive, and we have to find those avenues where we feel it's safe. And I would also say that, a place to talk about how you feel is with your medical providers. That's the starting point, that you've got to identify it, call it by name, find the resources, ask for help. There is help out there. You don't have to do this alone. And professionals, have gone into this career because they want to help people. So I think that's the important thing too, that we have to feel comfortable with someone like a doctor, like your provider, nurse practitioner, whatever it is. Find that help as a starting point, and then that the resources can follow.
So let me just, as we reach the 1 hour mark, I'll read this, and as we begin to wind down, I'll ask you to close out after reading this statement. The weight of the world is not your responsibility as a Black woman. The weight of the world is not your responsibility as a Black woman. I'll ask that you use 2 minutes to close out under the theme, the weight of the world is not your responsibility. What is your reaction?
Can I go first, simply because I can't hold my answer in? It's probably not the right response, but my gut response to that is, I know, but unless I see some action from some other people, yes, it is, because I'm leaving this world to my children. So it is my responsibility until I see something meaningful, consistent, productive, efficient from some other people in other groups. So until that happens, it kind of is. That's how I view it. So I know that's probably not the correct response, but that's my thought process.
And that's the correct response then.
So there you have it. So that's my little contribution. And just one more thing I wanted to add that is not in response to that, in response to something that, what you can do to help. Okay. Simple thank yous throughout the day. And for me, I don't think it applies to just me, but I know a lot of times we say, ask people how they're doing. How are you? How are you doing? No, I say no. I reject those 2 questions, because your response becomes so automated that the questions become meaningless. That fine, or how was your day? Good. It's like when you ask your kid, how was school? Or what did you learn in school today? You're not going to get meaningful responses. You have to switch up how you ask the question. You have to ask them, tell me something that made you laugh today. Tell me something new that you learned today. Tell me about an experience of a classmate today. You have to switch up how you ask the question to get the information. So just on a side note, I don't know what those questions are or should be, but I know that a simple, how are you? I know it sounds like your intent is good, your heart is good, but for someone who is high functioning depressed, that answer is going to come off too automated. It's going to be fine, good. And they can give you the spiel about all the projects they're doing and accolades and things of that nature, but you're not getting to the root of how they are, funny enough. So that's my little side note tangent. But yes, the weight of the world is on my shoulders because I'm leaving it to my kids.
Nobody's going to argue with a mother talking about leaving it to her kids. Monica.
That's the weight of the world. We just have to realize that, and I'm going to speak to everyone here. We are nothing without ourselves. We are not our positions. We are not our roles. We are just who we are. And for us to really get to full closure and to get to full health, we have to understand who we are as an individual, not who we're helping, not who we're coming in contact, not our children, not our parents, all of those. Everyone has their own cross to bear, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we are healthy for ourselves, because we are not anything but who we are. And we can be placed anywhere in the world, and we will still be ourselves. So we can't run away from who we are.
Perfect. Ms. Peterson.
That was a loaded question, a loaded statement. I think my entire career has been focused on the weight of the world and trying to speak for those who don't feel empowered to speak. You know, I'm in healthcare, particularly serving people who are low income. And I've watched how the system has left them out of the mainstream. If you have that insurance card, if you're employed and you get insurance from your employer, you almost as good as gold. You can find a doctor, you can find the resources. But those who, have a Medicaid card or no card, they've been left out of the mainstream. And so somebody has to speak for them. Somebody has to feel empowered for them. And it doesn't cost that much for healthcare in this country. We are the richest country in the world, and yet we can't provide quality basic healthcare for everybody. It's a right, not a privilege. And so, in my arena, I've felt that that's been my calling, that's what God put on my heart to do. And it's really hard not to feel, that I don't have to do that. And, as one of the panelists said, if I don't do it, I haven't seen others just step up and be so committed to do it. And it's a lifelong process. We're still trying to get to where we need to get to. So I'm I'm there as well. It probably wasn't the right answer, but it's reality.
No, it is your answer, so it's the right answer. Dr. Sessoms.
Yeah, I think the reality is, like, we're all experiencing this toxic stress too, right? And that feeling of hopelessness. And so the point about, like, is it my role? Is it my job? I know when I feel like it's just the weight is on me, what I have done is try to build, as my colleague says, build that coalition of the willing. It's literally almost, you have to teach people the skill, right? Teach people the skill and the agency to do this work. And that is what's been fulfilling to me, that I can go out and help people to find their voice, to name the issue, and then build a caucus around, like, now I can work together to solve the issue, because that was me. That is me, right, to a T. And, like, I want to solve it. I will take it all on myself at the detriment of my own health, right, where I was falling apart. So building that coalition has helped me, that when you're in this mode, because white supremacy will make you crazy. And I don't use that lightly, but, like, it will make you think that what you're trying to do and the efforts you're putting in are for naught, and that you will have no one that supports you. So when I think about that white supremacist mindset, I have to dismiss that by building up a body of believers that when I need to tap out, when I'm tired, that I got you, sis, right? And that is not just people that look like us too, right? So the work that I do, and the emotional labor that it is, and how hard it is sometimes, often talking to people that don't look like us, right? That white people, getting them to name what whiteness is for them and how they show up in this work and how they're working on their racial identity development has been key in this fight too. Because if you think about civil rights, we want to believe that it was just people like us doing that fight, and it wasn't. So if we can keep believing that it's just us, it's got to be us doing it and no one else is going to step up. A lot of that is true, but I often believe that, what James Baldwin talked about, those who believe that they're white versus those that happen to be white. I'm more for the people that just happen to be white. But I'm gonna work with you, and I'm saying, come along with us, because I'm tired. We started off with saying that I'm tired. but it can't just be us. So yes, there's spaces for us just to be present and just to be seen. But I also need everyone to see that I am not going to be free because you're not free. Even though you think you're free as a white individual, you're not free. Even though you think racism doesn't exist, we're all going down together. So my liberation is tied to yours. So when I can get people to understand that, that's what gives me hope to see another day. It gives me hope and keeps me going. Without that, then I might as well just, just pack it up and quit my work. But I keep moving because that is what I'm trying to get people to see, like our humanity, the dignity, the belonging, all of those things. That is key, and what I do to try to keep this moving forward.
It's not shameless. Please plug your. Yes.
Oh, plug myself.
Yes.
Yeah, I work with, if it's CEOs, if it's superintendents, whoever it is, but really what I'm trying to do is cultivate liberatory spaces, right, where we can be our full authentic selves. The work I do really just aligns with that, because when I come into organizations, I find that oftentimes people that look like us, right, are the ones hurting the most and often silenced the most. We know that as Black women. And when I can help them be in a space, there's something that's powerful that happens, a synergy that happens when I'm there, because they feel safe enough to share, right? And we saw that here today. We feel safe enough to share, and that's when momentum changes. And it's not just you're going to put our feelings on display, we're going to boohoo and cry about it. No, this is wisdom. Everything that we said tonight is wisdom. Our lived experiences is truth, and that's what you need to move this forward, to create seismic shifts, to make systemic changes. So these are the tools. This is the data that needs to be. It's not just all numbers. This is the quantifiable stuff that we can be tangible about, and that we're speaking our truth, and that you're listening to us and making seismic shifts in how we create safe spaces for all of us, that we can be seen, we can be heard. All of that is so important. So thank you, Karl, just for holding that space for us. Thank you for everyone that spoke their truth. I can go to sleep feeling like, whoo, I got some family that has my back, right? Like that's what it's about.
Your company.
Oh, my company. See, look, I'm not good at plugging myself.
Yeah, plug that too. I got you. I'm here for you.
I'll put it in the chat. There you go, Karl. Thank you.
Okay.
He's always has my back. I appreciate it.
No, you know it.
But
and see, I did just real quickly, Karl, I did put someone asked, and your listeners asked for local people of color counselors. Okay. I put that in the chat as well. Purposely Soaring is located in Lingelstown on the square, and also Inclusive Therapist is a nationwide. You can find someone that looks like you, because we understand how important that is too. I go to a therapist that doesn't look like me, and when that verdict came for George Floyd, I could not go to therapy that day. I said, I'm not going because she doesn't understand, right? And I couldn't do it that day. So I know how important it is sometimes for that. So I did put those things in the chat as well.
Okay, then we'll definitely. And here's another piece we want to, before we, Tamika, I think you're going to close us out. This segment is going to end. However, the conversation does not. We ask all of our guests to continue to participate, because we do post this on this is Facebook Live now, but we do post it to YouTube. And so the comments and the conversation can continue. Don't be surprised if you get inbox or Facebook friend requests, etc. So that you can definitely continue the conversation. And we will highlight, as we were saying, or we have it right here, Dr. Sessoms, we'll continue to highlight that. And so, as well as, of course, your own private practice as well. So, Ms. Hatcher, feel free, take us out.
So I just want to say to Dr. Amber Sessoms, like, that it's so classic and so typical of Black women to be self-deprecating. Now, you ask her about her company, what she does, and she's sitting here the whole time plugging other people. Oh, I'll put it in the chat. Never did say what the name of her company is, but like, I'm here to tell you that Dr. Amber Sessoms is kick ass when it comes to this like psychology thing. Like, she does her thing in spaces where there are very few of us, and she stands 10 toes down and delivers as a professional. And it's been a thrill to watch her grow and develop and to get her degree. And I mean, it's just wonderful. Like, it's just great to see. So like, we can be proud and like, we can be humble and all that, but don't be afraid to toot your own horn. And like, for myself, I want to say that in general, Black women, we're pretty solid in our own self-esteem, but even sometimes we need a pump up. What I do with my son is something I call a 30-second pump up, and I tell him all the good things about himself. You know, you're smart, you're kind, you're considerate, you're handsome, anything that I can think about him. And I can see that literally in the immediate, like lifting his spirits. And so that's something that we have to do for ourselves. And it's something that we have to do for one another. It's something certainly that so many Black women have done for me. When they've seen that my crown was tilted or my chin was a little down, they quickly picked up my head and just lifted me up. And even if it was nothing but, come on, sis, we're going to go out and have a slice of butter cake at our favorite restaurant or whatever, we lift ourselves up. But Karl, to your point, the question that you asked was, Black women, we don't have the weight of the world on our shoulders. My visceral thought to that was,
not your responsibility.
Not our responsibility.
Yes.
My answer to that, or my response to that was, since when? That was my immediate thought. Since when? We've always have, and we always will. But in all of our warrior womanness, even though we get tired, even though it's hard sometimes, you know, he's not heavy. He's my brother. So whether we're talking about the Black man that we're walking beside, you know, sometimes carrying on our back, pulling along, whether it's our sons we're raising, whether it's our daughters we're bringing along, whether it's our peers in the professional world. Yeah, I believe that we do. Like, we absolutely do, and shamelessly. But what I think we could do better with is asking for help, admitting sometimes that we need to take our cape off, that we can't always do it. We need to delegate on the job sometimes. And sometimes we have to call our husbands, our brothers, our partners out and tell them, look, I need more from you. I just need more from you. You're not showing up for me, and I need more from you. Accountability on the part of ourselves, one another, and just the community at large.
So thank you for that. So I was looking up something in which, God rest her soul, Ms. Darlene M. Smith from Premier Arts and Science Charter School, Premier Learning Center. One of the things that she always taught the young people, some of which were my relatives, was the poem Our Deepest Fear. And a portion of that, I think, is definitely highlighting what I want to leave with you all today. And it reads in part, there's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within all of us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And so on that, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us here on A Seat at the Table. This is your first time on A Seat at the Table this year, but definitely will not be your last. Again, I cannot thank you enough. We love, appreciate, and value you. And we want to give you perpetual thanks, ongoing, for the things that you're going to do. And on that, what we like to do is end by quite simply saying to the males out there, this is also a safe place for you. You know, these are trying times for all of us, not only our sisters, but for us as Black men in particular as well. We don't have it all together. So we want you to know that it's okay, as you see on the screen, to cry, to need support, to be vulnerable, go to therapy, to not be okay, to talk about feelings, to ask for help, and to break down from time to time. Understanding that you have a safe space to help build you back up. So on that, we thank you for joining us. We thank the control room, the Lewis brothers, Conrad and Chad. The Lewis brothers, Craig and Conrad, as well as Chad Scott. And we thank you, our viewing audience, for continuing to support us as we continue to do great work on behalf of the community in 2022. Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. We'll see you next time.